In this video, we're going to show you how to replace the crankshaft position sensor on your Honda Pilot. This sensor will require a relearn procedure. Let's get started. Pushing on the tabs, we're going to remove the cover from the bottom of the splash shield. Reaching up inside, you're going to find a little screw for the bottom of the radiator. We're going to open that and we're going to start to drain the radiator fluid. Before draining your coolant, be sure to have a drain bucket under you. To drain the radiator faster, we're going to open the top cap. Be sure that the system is cold when you do this. If the system's hot, it will be pressurized and it can come up and spray you. Using a 10mm socket, loosen the terminals on the battery. Remove the negative first, pop it off to the side, remove the positive, loosen the wing nuts, then remove the poles, and pull the bracket back as I pull the battery out, and remove the battery from the car. Remove the engine cover, remove the coolant reservoir. We're going to pull straight up out of the bracket. Pull the line out of the plastic stay. And we're going to move it over to the other side out of the way. Using a 14mm socket, we're going to put tension on the auto tensioner, loosen the belt, and pull it off. Let the tensioner return. And then continue to remove the belt. Using a 19mm socket, remove the 5 lug nuts. Remove the wheel. Remove the 10mm bolt at the corner of the bumper. This bolt should come out. There's a metal bracket on top of that it screws into, and that metal bracket is spinning with the bolt inside of it, and it ripped our front fender liner apart. There'll be one more bolt. Our shield is broken right here, so we don't necessarily have to remove it. And that bracket is spinning as well. Remove these 2 bolts, and then go to the other side and do the same thing. We're going to remove the 3 clips on the front of the cover. Pull the cover down. And remove it from the vehicle. Remove the clips out of the front of the inner fender liner. There's going to be one more up top. Then we're going to pull the inner fender liner back behind the brake rotor, and that's going to give us plenty of room. Using a 14mm, we're going to remove the bolt out of the middle of the tensioner. Unscrew the bolt. You won't be able to get it out yet. Just pull it out as far as it can go. Using a 12mm socket, we're going to remove the bolt on the bottom of the tensioner. Remove the bottom bolt. Remove the pulley. and the tensioner. Using a 12mm socket, remove the bolt on the back of the power steering pump. There's one more bolt for the power steering pump on the bottom. We're going to lift the power steering reservoir straight up out of its bracket. Pull it slightly up to the side. We're going to pull this power steering pump up and out of the way. Just like that. Using a pair of pliers, we're going to squeeze the back of the plastic clip and pull it out of the cover. Using a 10mm socket, we're going to remove the bolts out of the top cover. There's one more right next to the alternator. And remove the cover. Remove the 10mm bolts for the rear timing cover. Remove the wire harness out of the plastic stay of the rear timing cover. And then remove the rear cover. We're going to use a little bit of heat on the crank bolt. This crank bolt should have a bit of thread locker on it, so we're going to heat it up and try and loosen that before we try to remove it. This is a special tool designed for the Honda crankshafts. You do not need it, but it's nice to have. Using the holder and a 19mm socket, we're going to break the crank bolt free. Once I crack the bolt free, we can remove it. Wiggle the crank pulley back and forth. As you're wiggling, be pulling out off of the shaft and remove the crank pulley. Using a 10mm socket, we're going to remove the bolts out of the lower cover. Remove the cover. Remove the plate off of the crankshaft. I'm going to reinstall the crank bolt. Using a 10mm socket, we're going to remove the 2 nuts and 1 bolt. You'll have to remove the 2 nuts for the plate. Remove those. And we'll pull the plate off. Remove the bolt. Remove the crank sensor. There's a little push button tab. We're going to remove the connector off of the sensor. Pull it off. Just going to use a clean rag and wipe up a little bit of oil that's been spilled over the years. And install the new crank sensor. Make sure this is nice and clean. Install it back on the posts. Get my bolt started. Install the plate and get the nuts started. Go around and snug everything down. Torque these nuts and bolts anywhere from 7 to 8 foot-pounds. Using a 19mm socket, we're going to remove the crank bolt. Install the plate. Do this with the curve pointed out. Install the lower cover into the vehicle. Go around and get the bolts started. Go around and snug down all of the bolts. Using a rag and some brake parts cleaner, we're going to clean the crank bolt. We're going to pull the washer down and get in there as well. Once you've done that, we're going to add engine oil in between the washer and the head of the bolt. Use clean new engine oil. put it over. And then also on the top of the washer. Install the crankshaft pulley. Set it into the keyway. And wiggle it into place. Then install the oiled bolt. Tighten it by hand. Using a crank pulley holder, we're going to hold the crank. We're going to torque our crank bolt to 48 foot-pounds. And then we're going to go an additional 60 degrees. You can use an angle meter if you have one. If you do not, you can mark the head of the bolt and mark a spot on the crank, and then hold the crank as you spin the bolt to that 60-degree mark. While holding the crankshaft, turn your bolt 60 degrees. Install the top front timing cover. And get the bolt started. Go around and snug down all of the bolts. And we'll do the same thing on the back cover. Install this wire harness first into this cover, and then fit it up into place. Get the bolt started. Go around and snug down all the bolts. Install the 10mm bolt through the top bracket. Snug it down. Install the harness clip onto the timing cover. Push it into place, it'll click in. Install the belt tensioner. I have the big bolt installed through the middle for the pulley. Drop it down through the top. Turn it. Then we're going to get the bolt started. Install the bolt into the bottom of the tensioner. Line up the holes and get the bolt started. Snug the bolts down. Torque this middle pulley bolt to 33 foot-pounds. Torque the bottom bolt to 16 foot-pounds. Install the power steering pump back into place. Torque the power steering pump bolts to 16 foot-pounds. I'm going to reach down and install the belt around the crank. I'm also going to put it around the AC compressor. With our belt set up, ready to go, we're going to use a 14mm socket on the top pulley. We're going to push on this, giving ourselves some space. Compress the tensioner and pull the belt over the pulley. Double check that the belt is sitting in the pulley. Go around and check them all, making sure they're sitting in the right ribs. And if it's sitting on a smooth pulley, make sure it's sitting square. Install the plastic harness stay onto the metal bracket. We're going to install the power steering reservoir back into place. I had mine tied up with a bungee cord. If you had one of those, remove that now. Pull the reservoir down and drop it into the bracket. Should feel it click into place. Grab your coolant reservoir, bring it back over, and drop it into the bracket. And install the line into the plastic stay. Install the battery. Hook the poles into the hooks at the bottom of the tray. And tighten down the wing nuts. Install the positive battery cable. Snug it down. Install the negative battery cable. Snug it down. On the radiator, I have installed a coolant funnel. We're going to fill the radiator with coolant Let this bubble and drink the rest of the coolant. Once the radiator is full of fluid, we're going to put a little bit more in here, and then we're going to go inside of the car and start it. This will start the bleeding procedure for the coolant, and we're going to run the car until we see no more bubbles coming out of here, and the coolant level may drop again. When the coolant is fully bled inside of the vehicle, you'll be able to have the heat on, and you will have no cold pockets. It will just always be hot. At that point, go ahead and remove your coolant funnel from the car and install your radiator cap. Install the under tray. We're going to hook it up inside of here first. Pull the inner fender liner back into place. Tuck it up under the front bumper. We'll go around and start putting clips in. One more. There's two 10mm bolts on the underside of the bumper that go in to the inner fender liner. Our bolts are broken. This one just spins inside, this one's snapped, so we will not be resecuring these. However, if you have these bolts, go ahead and attach those now. Install the wheel. Get the 5 lug nuts started. Snug them down. Torque your wheels to 80 foot-pounds in a star pattern. And you're good to go. Don't forget, you will need to do a relearn procedure at the end of this job. The steps are in the video description.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.